Hello everyone, New Games here with another video on remaking Getaway Shootout in Unity. Check out the first video in the series for more information on this project. But today we are going to be handling the player input on our players that we have in the scene so far. In the last video, we got the player movement working. But obviously, currently right now, both players respond to the same input. So if you have two players, they're both going to be on the same input keys. And the goal of this video today is to create a player input system that allows you to have multiple players playing at the same time. Also, I should note from last video, I did make small changes to the player movement code. Some of the changes I organized kind of the variables better and maybe changed a little of the names to make more sense. And also just the kind of functionality changes. In the actual Getaway Shootout code, I have something called a jump cooldown. And this just prevents the player from spamming jump too fast and going really fast. So this is just a cooldown timer. I set it to 0.15 seconds to make sure that the player doesn't jump too fast. And I checked this, let's see, in the turning code. So I just make sure that the jump time, if it's greater than 0, this jump timer, just return right away. And always in the update, just decrease the jump time. The other change that I did was just to add the player direction to the sprite. And this is kind of just a temporary change right now. I included it right here, is just to make sure that the player sprite turns in the right direction, and this is just by setting the scale. I think in the future this would be better handled into like a character sprite manager, where it also sets the character sprite and then handles these changes for changing the sprite. But that'll be good for so far. So yeah, like I said, the goal now is to do player input, and Unity created this whole new input system that I was not using. When I originally made the Getaway Shootout code, it was using the old Unity input system. And Unity now has this new input system that has been around for at least 5 years. So it's not too new, but that's what we'll be using, the new input system. And I have mixed feelings about it. It's nice in some ways, as we'll see, but also a little clunky to work with in other ways, but we'll go forward with using it. So the first thing to kind of set up this input system, Unity has a nice user interface. So I'm just going to go to the assets folder, and Unity automatically creates input system object. And this is default with Unity 6. So if I just double click this, it brings up a nice input actions editor. And this is where you can define all your key bindings for your player movement, your UI, whatever you want in the game. And I really enjoy this feature of the new input system. So the first thing that we'll do is just to define the player input bindings. And Unity defaults to already have a player action map, but it has all these actions that we don't really need for the game. The game only requires the move left, move right, and then a power up button. So I'm actually just going to delete the default action map for player, and we'll create our own. So I'm just going to go up here, create our own, and call it just player again. And the actions that we'll use, we'll have one action called move left. We'll also have another action called move right, and then finally another action called not move but power up. we'll call it. And this is when the player has a power-up, and we'll focus on power-ups later in the series. So with the move left, before I create a binding to that, I'm going to go up here and create a control scheme. And this is where it kind of gets a little hard for our scenario. I want 2 players on the same keyboard. So I'm going to actually create separate control schemes for each player. Player on the left side of the keyboard and player on the right side of the keyboard. So I'm going to go up here and add a scheme name, keyboard left. And for the devices, I'm going to select keyboard. So let me find it here quick. Okay, there we go. And also, I'm not really going into depth of how this whole input system works. So if you're interested in actually learning this input system, check out the documentation. Unity has a pretty good documentation, but it is a lot, this new input system. So, okay, we have our keyboard left control scheme. I'm just going to add another control scheme now. And I'm going to call this keyboard right for the right side player. This is also just a player 2. And same thing, I'm going to add a keyboard as the device type. Okay, so now we have those 2 control schemes. The next thing I want to do is to assign bindings to these control schemes, which just means what key to respond and actually call to action. So on the move left action, and I'm on the keyboard left, I'm going to add a binding, and for some reason there's 2 bindings that got created there. Go back to this. Might have glitched out there. Okay. And I guess it comes with global bindings. But okay, so we're going to delete all the previous bindings and add a binding. And now this is where we set our actual key that we want. And I'm going to go and click the button and click listen just for an easy way to set the binding. So move left, we want it to be the W key. So I press W and then enter. That gives me the W key. And then now, I guess before I go to the next one, I want to make sure that it's set to the correct binding or to the correct control scheme. So this is going to be our keyboard left player. So I'm going to click it right there. Okay, so now let's go to the move right. We want this to be the E key. So I'm going to go to the path, listen to the keyboard, press E, and then set it. Again, this is just a global binding, which we don't want. We just want it for the left player. So I'm going to set it to the keyboard left. And then finally with our power up, add binding. And this is going to be the R key, and set it to the keyboard left. Okay, so that's great for the keyboard left player. I'm just going to save this. I must have deleted the keyboard right scheme. So I'm going to go back and add this back in. And select keyboard. Okay, so now I added this control scheme back in, and I am now selected on the keyboard right. I'm going to add in the keyboard right bindings quickly. This is the same process, but just different keys. So I for move left, and you don't have to use these keyboard bindings. Oops, I don't know if that got created in. It did. We just don't want it on the gamepad. We want it on the keyboard right. Do this for the move right. This could be the O key in my case. And finally, the power up key. This could be P for the right. And make sure I set the control schemes for these players. Bindings. Okay, so now just to make sure that we've set it all correctly, right now I switched back to the all control schemes, but if I click the keyboard left control scheme, we should see all the bindings that we want. You can even put in multiple bindings, but for right now, these are just the keys that we want for the left player. Switching to the right control scheme, we have the correct bindings as well. So that all looks good. I use Control S to save this, and now jumping back to our scene. So now the next thing to do is to actually implement this into the player script. But before I do that, I just want an easy way to create these players. And I think it's a good time to actually just create a game manager script. This will be kind of like our main brains of the project, handling all the game state and player creation. So I'm just going to create this script called Game Manager. You don't need to name it Game Manager, but it's just a common thing to do in Unity. So I'm going to find this script and open it up. And I accidentally didn't make it a mono behavior script, but there is now a mono behavior. So with the game manager, like I was saying, I just want a quick way to create the players in our scene and kind of handle the initial creation. So I'm just going to go and have an awake function. This just calls at the beginning of the scene. It's nice to have it on awake because this will be actually before start. So Game Manager will be calling all these functions right at the start of the scene, which is kind of what we want. And one of the functions that we want to call is just create a players function. So that all looks good. So we'll obviously create players on the awake, and I'll actually just for right now just create a variable called a player object, this will be a prefab which we can instantiate the players with. So I'm gonna instantiate player object. I guess we can just keep it as just the normal position, so that all the players will be instantiated at the same spot. That'll be fine for right now, and that should work. So simple script to create players. I'm going to hop back to Unity quick and actually add this to our scene. So it's also handy just to create a scripts object. I like to do this. You don't have to do it, but it's just an object in our scene that will contain all these like main scripts, which makes it just easy to navigate and handle. So I'm going to add the game manager to this scripts object, and then we'll need to set the player object. So in our prefabs, I'm going to drag the player object and set that. Before I start this, I'm going to just remove the old players that we had, and let's see if this works just to create a simple player. Okay, so seems like we have created the player, which seems to be working fine. There was a slight glitch there with the player direction of the sprite, but for right now I think that's fine. When creating the sprite, it'll be fine. Just have that slight glitch where it's not orientated correctly. So now jumping back, so we created the players, but we just created one player. I'm going to create just a temporary variable called number of players, and default is just 1, but basically we want to create a for loop that creates the number of players that we want. So something like this, and this is how we can easily create just a number of players. So I'm going to set this to 2 and see what happens. But this is all just kind of temporary. Obviously, we don't want to have this variable here. It'd be better to have it in some sort of settings or some sort of state. But this is like before. Now we have 2 players using the same input. So now the goal is to actually have the players created with different player inputs. So this is where it kind of gets a little clunky with the player input system, the new input system of Unity. They have something called the player input, player input manager, and they also have a player input script, and these are supposed to be for handling player input. But I find it a little, a little too clunky, and also just it makes you really form to their kind of architecture. But we're gonna go and use these two scripts because it does handle a lot of functionality that it'd be kind of annoying to implement ourselves. But we won't do it exactly the way that they recommend in the documentation. We'll kind of try to make it as general as possible. So we're gonna have this player input manager here, and we're gonna need a reference to this. So I'm gonna do player input manager, and we'll call it input manager. And basically on awake, we just want to say get component player input manager, and set this to our input manager. So we just have a quick reference here. And I'm just going to create a temporary function called create input. This could be handled by some other input script in the future, but for right now, I think it's going to be fine to have it temporarily here. So before we create players, we want to create this input. Okay, so what do I mean by creating input? Well, the player input manager, we call it input manager, has this function for adding input objects, adding player inputs to it. So if I forget what it's exactly called, I think join player. Yes. Okay, so if we call this function join player, it creates a player input object for us to use. And I'll get into the player input object later, but that's what we want for each player, basically. So this join player method wants some variables that we'll pass in. So player index, we'll give it to the player index. And actually, before I do this, I'm going to create it in a for loop with the number of players. That way we can have each one player indexed. So we're going to say it's the ith player. We won't pass in the split screen index because we'll be handling that on our own, but the control scheme is actually what we want. And this is the control scheme we created. So this is either keyboard left or keyboard right. Actually, I never set this, but we want to use the gamepad. I think that'd be a great opportunity to use gamepads if we have more than 2 players. This is something I didn't do in the original game, but I think it's going to be a good addition to have, so you can play up to how many ever players you want, all using their gamepad. But for right now, maybe I'll just do something like this. So if the I is less than 2, so this is definitely a keyboard player now, we want to use keyboard left, or we want to use keyboard right. And I guess maybe just for clarity, I'm just going to do this and copy it a bunch of times. So the first player, keyboard left. Let's see if we want anything else in this argument. Importantly, we need to pass in a device. So I'm going to say keyboard.current to get the current keyboard. Control scheme. We have to give, since these are kind of passed in as named variables, pair with device is the parameter passed in, and this is just the keyboard current, as I said. Okay, so we have the first player down. now I'm going to do the second player. So if it equals 1, we want to do the keyboard right scheme. And then finally, this is where I was talking about using the gamepad. We will want to, we will want to use gamepad for the final scheme. So, and right here, we'll leave this out for right now. Basically, if you don't pass in a pair with device, it'll try to find it automatically. The problem here is you can't use the same device twice, so we have to manually send in keyboard.current to force it to use the same device twice. But it should be fine right here to have it not labeled. Okay, so that seems good. These are creating the player input objects, which is what we want. And let's see. So that, yeah, it seems good right now. Let me jump back and actually get this player input manager into the scene. So I'm just gonna put the player input manager on the same game manager since that's how we did it in the script. And I'm just gonna, we won't be using notifications right now, but change it to C#. And I will, I guess, just disable joining for right now since we don't use that functionality. Basically, we just want players to join the scene, and we're calling it, I guess, manually. We don't have to worry about this right now. You can actually set it to anything you want. And we're not enabling split screen, so that all looks good. The one thing that we need is this player prefab object. And this is where Unity wants you to actually use your actual player prefab object. And I don't like this. I think it forces you to constrain too much to this player input manager. I'm actually going to create a whole separate object and call it the player input object, which I'll do right now. And this, all it does is just have the player input script. I'm just going to say player input. Reset the transform and add the player input script to this. This is the thing that we're trying to create. Each player will have one of these player inputs. And let's turn off auto switching for right now. You can read up on these features in the documentation as well. Default map, I'll default to player, and I think all the other settings, I guess behavior, we want to invoke C# events, and I'll show you how to handle that later. But everything else looks pretty good. And so now we want to add this player input to a prefab. I'm just going to drag it into our prefabs folder, and that way we can add the player prefab to this player input manager. So the player input manager is going to create a bunch of these player input scripts, and we can actually see what this does. Let's see if I'm going to run it and see what exactly this does, just to show you. So we've created, since we have 2 players set, we've created 2 player inputs. And also, as before, we still have those 2 player clones. So I'm trying to separate this just to make it, more generalized. And I think it just will be helpful. So this player input script, we want each one to communicate with the associated player. So this one would communicate with this player, and this one would communicate with that player. And like I said before, you could have this like on the actual player, and it'd make it easier off the bat. But I would like it if they were separate. So that's what I'm going to continue doing. And the way we're going to do this is create a script on the player object that finds the correct player input. So let me show you what I'm thinking about. So if we jump into our scripts, I'm going to create actually two scripts here. So first one is just going to be called a player script. This will have our associated player ID. Basically, it's just a way to identify our player. So I'm going to say public int. Actually, I'm going to make this private just to make it more safe. So player ID, maybe just ID. And then I'm going to have a public, I'm going to have functions to get this. So public int get player ID and just return ID. And then we'll also have a public function to set the ID. So set player ID equals, and then we have to pass in the ID. So these are just, two simple functions to set the ID. The script really doesn't do much right now. This actual player will do more stuff in the future. But that seems good for right now. And then I'll just create the other script that I'm thinking about. So if I go to scripting, model behavior script, and I'm going to call this player human controller. Controller. I would call it just player input, but since we already have player input from the Unity, I named it this. So the goal of this script is to communicate with that player input to our own player, or to our own player movement. So first thing I'm going to do is just get a reference to our player movement. Maybe just call it PM. So PM equals just our player movement, since this will be on the same object. And now this is where we want to actually find the player movement or the player input associated with our player ID. So we'll also, get component, the player, that player script that we just created, and we want to know the player ID, and that seems great. So now we get this player ID. This is the way that we identify our object. Our player input, those objects that we created before, has a nice function to actually get player by index, and index just meaning ID in this case, which we'll use. And I'm just gonna get the associated player input, the one that we're wanting to associate with this player, by the ID, and then we can actually store this. So player input, maybe we'll just name it input, and we'll set it there. Okay, so we have this associated right off the bat. Let's see, the other thing that we want to do is to now use this input object to listen to events like key presses and other items or other functionality to actually move our player. And let me just check quick the documentation for that. I'll just need a quick refresh. Okay, so I just looked at the documentation. So our input, the way we can get these actions from the player input is using the following. So if I use the input and get the current action map, and then find action, this will be the actions that we previously set up, and you reference them by name. So this would be move left for the first one, and I'm just going to store this in a variable. We'll call it up here. So input action, move left, And I know that we're gonna do multiple, so move right. And then finally the powered up action. So I'm just gonna set these quick here. And do it all for them quick. Okay, so we set these actions right away. I think, so start will be, I think we're gonna wanna actually change this to awake, because what we're actually gonna do is have another function called onEnable, and to actually subscribe to these actions. And this is just one way of doing it. You can look at the documentation online. I find these callbacks pretty helpful, so that's what I'm going to do for right now. So let's do that. Do the callback method, which is for each action, you put the action, and then we want to know basically when it started. Well, I guess, so there's multiple callbacks for each action. There's started, there's also performed, and there's canceled. Basically, these are just different states of the button. So started will be when the button is just pressed. And I'm just going to create a function here. So void on move, we'll maybe call it callback. I'll probably change these names again to make them more sense, but for right now it's fine. So let me check what, so it needs to be an input action, callback context, and callback context. So this is just going to be our callback from this function, and this can be pretty confusing if you're just learning to code. Callbacks are kind of a more advanced technique. But basically, on this move left button press, it will call this function, how I set up right now. So this will be called every time move left is started, and I'm going to do this for actually when it's canceled, which means when the button is released. I'm going to call this function as well, and I'm actually going to do it for the right keys as well. So move right. So when the buttons are pressed up and down for the move keys, they're all going to call this function here, which is handy because then we can now handle it based on the context. So, well, since the first thing we need to know in this move callback is if we are the right key, the move to the right key. So I'm going to say bool maybe is right, and that's just going to be the context action. So this is the current button being pressed, or current action being happening, and if it equals our move right action, then yeah, this is the right button. So now I want to switch, or let's see. Now I want to also do another function on the context. So I want to know if the context is being started as up there, since all this is being called at once. So I need to know if it's being started, do some function there, and then otherwise, if it doesn't like it, because here, I'll just do something here. Otherwise, if context is canceled, do something here as well. And these are basically, again, the button being pressed and the button being released. And they're all being sent in from these callbacks. And like I was saying before, okay, so this is right just means, are we the right key? So are we move right or are we move left? And from here, if we press down, and we want to start turning, this is what we did in the previous video. So start your turn, and conveniently we can just pass in, are we the right key here, to notify that. And then on the other side, we want to do not start turn when we release button, but we actually want to jump here. So again, this is just our player movement has this jump function, and we'll pass in if it is right. So let's see what is going wrong here. Oops. So context canceled. It's complaining about something. Let's see, what is it complaining about? There's obviously something. Or is this canceled? Oh, okay, so oh, sorry. Okay, we want to do if, else if canceled there. So yeah, I was just missing the if statement there. That's why I wasn't compiling. And then, okay, with this all set, this should be fine to do our movement. The only other thing we want to do here is actually copy this, and just following the Unity documentation, we want to remove these callbacks when we delete the player. That way we don't keep subscribing to a callback, and it can be bad because then it never gets deleted, and basically you always want to unsubscribe your callbacks when you delete your object, and that's the disable function here. So that's just handling callbacks, and yeah, so that should be pretty good. We can try this out now. So this is the player controller. I'm gonna hop back to the game manager quick because we haven't added this yet. So when we're creating that player, we're gonna want to add that player controller object. So I'm just gonna get a reference here. We want to add the component of the player human controller, basically. And this could be, so if we are human, add this controller, and then we'll do it in later videos where if we're not human, we'll add like a player computer controller as well. But for right now, that should be fine. And also, I haven't added this yet, but we want to do player get component, that player script, and we want to set the player ID just to whatever ID we set in the index. So that looks good. I'll add this player script now, coming back to the game. Oops. Still getting used to switching the scene. Okay. We'll want to add this player script to the player. Let's add that here. Oops, kind of just jumped to it. Okay, I'm gonna add it. Okay, so we added this player script. Basically, we just need it on the player to set that player ID. I'm gonna reset this rotation. So, okay, now let's test that. Pretty sure we have everything in place to get that started. I'm just gonna check. Okay, it looks good so far. If I press, so they're still using the same player input. Just want to check. So we can actually get a nice debug here of the player input object and seeing what control scheme. So this is using control left. This is using control right, which is great. And these, we added this human controller on it. Let's just see where we went wrong, because they're still on the same input, which is not exactly what we want. Okay, so we set the player ID. Let me just check the human controller. And in cases like this, like, it's always nice to just start debugging. So I'm just going to input dot, or I'm just going to get our player component. So I'm just debugging the player for now. Okay, good. Both of them port different indexes. Let me actually, there's a nice tool in Unity. You can put debug mode. This will give you extra information about private variables, which is helpful in this case. So let's see. You're using this player input. Okay. What about the other person? Okay, they're both using different player inputs. Both player input is on different schemes. It should be working. Control scheme. I'm just going to pause this quick and debug it a little more, and I'll come back. Okay, I figured out it's just a simple mistake. I completely forgot to disable the original player input that we were doing, and that was just directly on the player movement script. So let me change that here. And all I want to do is just delete that old player input code. Okay, so jumping back, now we should be able to see that the player input is now separated. So one player, we have the W and E key, and the other player, we have the other keys as well. And I just noticed I actually did the same mistake as before when I was coding. Basically, in this controller, we don't want, let's see. Yeah, we don't want it on press. We actually want it on the hold, because that's basically, if we do it on press, it's not lenient enough. We'll actually miss some cases when the player is trying to turn. It's just easier to have it on hold, so the player can hold that button. And let me see if there's a quick way of doing this. So we're gonna have to change this. I think performed. Okay. I'm not exactly sure if there's a callback. I'm just gonna look quick to see in the documentation if there's a callback. Okay, so it actually appears like there is no callback for seeing if the button is being held currently. And so I think my plan then is just to do this manually, because we know when the button's pressed down and it's released, so we can calculate it just internally in the script. But I might come back to this after the video and see if there's a better way, and I'll just kind of publish it on the Git so you can check it out later if I decide to, and I'll mention it in the next video as well. So just to do this internally quick, I'm going to do a function, just create some more functions here. So basically we want this Unity update call, and basically I want to be checking if we are like holding this button down. We want to be calling the turn function. So let's do, so two variables here quick. So bool is left down and bool is right down. It kind of, this way kind of is not as ideal because it's a polling method, and I like this callback setup that does it on the callback. So there might be, yeah, obviously, as I said, other ways to do this in the future. So I'm just going to do this for now, though. So if the left is down, we want to do the start turn, and then we'll do false because we have the left direction. And then also if is right down, we want to do the same thing, but just with the right direction. And then, oops, with the right direction. And then we want to just change this code up a little bit. So we'll do, I forget what we named it. Is right down. So basically we want to say something more like this. So if, and since we don't, we'll do is right. We'll set is right down, true. And then if is left down, is left. I guess, sorry, do like that. Otherwise, it's going to be the left key, so is left down equals true. And looks good. We'll just have to do the same thing over in here. So we want to set these to false. And do that with the jump. Okay, so that is a quick fix. And now that I switched kind of to this, like, this is called polling, always continuous checking, there might just be better setups to not just use the callbacks in general, but I'm just going to keep it for how it is right now. And we have an error. Okay, so we already had the update function. Let's remove that. Okay, so let's try this. And this was just to change it because I like it when it's on hold. You can just hold the button, and when you hit the ground, you already start turning. That's just how Unity or the Getaway Shootout did it. It looks like our players, they're turning, maybe they're not getting up. Let's see. I mean, that balance works. Maybe I didn't fully implement the balance correctly. I'll double check that. There's definitely a little weirdness there, especially when they hit each other. But it does seem to be working now, just in the input sense that you can do both of your players and yeah, jumping just with one of the players. And yeah, so that the whole input system is working. That doesn't seem to be looking correctly, at least corresponding to the game. I'll check on that. But that should be it for this video. In the next video, I think will be a good opportunity to actually do the camera movement. Basically, we want the camera to always be aligned with one of our players. And also we want two cameras if we decide there's two players or even more. Also as well, I'm just realizing we didn't actually input the gamepad. Maybe I'll do that after this in the video. And basically we just want bindings for the gamepads as well, so we can use those. And I actually don't have a gamepad with me, so I'm not able to test if that will work, but we can do that in a future video. But yeah, that should be it for right now. Check back in the next video, and I'll try to figure out this sort of issue right now before the end of the next video. Okay, thank you. Bye.